What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 60 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello.
Hello, Steve. How you doing this week?
I'm all right. You? I'm hanging in there.
You're
More
hanging
car
in there.
problems, which I'm sure we'll go into detail on one more thing. But if you've been following along with my car issues for the last year, I don't know what I did to the car gods to just have them smite down.
It was your
on me
hubris, Steve. You bought too many cars. They were like, how dare you? They're striking you down. Too many false idols. Yeah, and I'm fighting a cold, and I gotta do back-to-back podcasts today. So it's a banner fucking week for us here at FlipScreen Games. But I promise you, we've got a rip-roaring good show for you this week because E3 2023 has revealed some of its plans, and I gotta say, some of it sounds pretty good. We'll see what that means. And then, of course, the question on everybody's lips: has Steve gotten a point for Cyberpunk?
It's on my lips, definitely, because I want to win at least one prediction round this year.
And
it looks like you're currently winning Nintendo and
FlipScreen Games.
The FlipScreen one.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm not best pleased at the situation. So I really just need Cyberpunk to have its comeback.
So we're gonna debate. We're gonna talk about that today. Has Cyberpunk earned this comeback? Because of course, it had its brand new anime adaptation, Edgerunners, drop just a few days ago at this point. And it has meant quite a bit for Cyberpunk 2077's fortune. So we're going to talk all about that and more. But before we get into that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by is brought to you for the last time by our Patreon producers for the month of October. They are, of course, Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Mary Berry, Wakahula, and Zaid Ida. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. Y'all are the realest of the real, and we appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Speaking of which, we have a very special video up on the channel this week for all you Steam Deck fans. If you own a Steam Deck and you're interested in figuring out how you can get your Xbox to stream directly to your Steam Deck, our buddy Steve here did a whole 15-minute tutorial that you can go check out. And I'm very eager to get this working.
You're gonna do it for the Steam Deck podcast this week, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna try and get it done before that so that we can talk all about it.
Awesome.
So yeah, if you want a tutorial for yourself, of course, go check out the video that's live right now. If you want to hear our discussion about the experience actually using it to play Xbox games, you can tune into the Steam Deck podcast this week. But aside from that, I have another piece of housekeeping for you. Next week, we have a very special episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast planned. If you are a Patreon supporter, or if you remember when we did our kind of year one celebration stream, we launched relaunched our Patreon, I should say, and one of the big perks that you can get if you are a Patreon producer of the show is you can suggest main topics over on Patreon. So next week's show, we are going to be doing our very first patron suggested topic, where we're going to be talking all about our video game collectible collections. So we're going to talk about stuff like, cool, obscure pieces of game memorabilia that we have, collector's editions, all that good stuff, rare games. So definitely write in, and if you have, some of your favorite collectibles or cool things from your collection that you'd like to see highlighted on the show, please make sure you write in and include pictures or video if you can, so that I can include them in the B-roll. It's going to be a really fun episode, and I'm definitely excited to show off some of the junk that I have accumulated over the years. So would love to see some cool stuff from you guys in the community as well. And if you want to get links to all the other places you can find us on the web, that's, of course, flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find our Discord, our email address if you want to write into the show. Bunch of other cool stuff, our Twitch channel, our archive channel, however you choose to get involved. We thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. So let's jump into our start screen. E3 2023 has gotten a date. From June 13th to the 16th will be the actual in-person event, and it's going to be at the LA Convention Center, and it's going to have separate days for industry people and consumers, and not only just different days, different spaces for those people as well, which I think is pretty interesting. So the ESA announced that there will be partner digital events and showcases kicking off as early as June 11th. Then on the 13th to the 15th, we'll have what's known as E3 Business Days, which will be reserved exclusively for registered industry personnel. And that includes members of the press and the media will be able to go hands-on with upcoming games. And then they'll have like the standard kind of showcase that you get from the devs or the publishers, kind of talking about the piece. You either get to play it, maybe you get a closed demo, all the stuff that you've come to expect with E3 coverage. And these will all be in dedicated industry-only halls and spaces. And then there will be the Gamer Days, which will take place from the 15th to the 16th. And that'll be a separate hall that's removed from the industry area that'll invite consumers who have tickets to just go hands-on with any of the games that are being showcased. And then there will also be a dedicated theater where if you're a ticket holder, you'll be able to get deep dive looks at highly anticipated titles, is how they described it. So I think similarly, right, for the stuff that isn't ready for you to go hands-on, there's like this theater where you could go and watch extended coverage, and they'll talk about, here's 45 minutes of gameplay, and we'll talk about all the features and everything that's coming to the game. So a little bit of just, I think, necessary context for this, right? Of course, the ESA still involved, but this will be the first E3, which is going to be operated by ReedPop, who, if you're not familiar with, ReedPop are the folks behind events like PAX, EGX, New York Comic Con, Star Wars Celebration, a lot of really big industry events like that, few of which I've attended, all of which I thought were very good. I'm a big fan of ReedPop events. New York Comic Con in particular is one I've been to every year since 2009. So big fan of that. So I am,
and it's always run pretty well, right? Because I've been to EGX, which I think is their only one they operate in the UK, and it's always been solid every time I've been. It's always been really great.
Yeah, I mean, I've attended New York Comic Con as a fan, as an exhibitor, as a member of the press, as a member of the. They have like another tier below that where it's like media people, but not necessarily journalists. So it's like I've been on every side of the fence that you can be as a member of New York Comic Con. And I've always had a really good experience. I think that the events are really well organized. I think that they do a good job of, giving the press a separate space where it's like simple to go and, if you're like in the press pool and you're doing the junkets, they have a whole area where like they bring people in and out. You can schedule time. Like it's very, very well organized. And as an attendee, I've always loved the event. It's my favorite event of the type. I think they do a good job of balancing things for like, hey, like, panels and all that kind of stuff are big media event opportunities for journalists and whomever, but like obviously folks want to be in the room, they want to have that experience as well, and I think they do a good job of kind of marrying those two things in a way that feels natural, let alone the fact that New York Comic Con has evolved into like a huge multimedia event where they have sections dedicated to comics, they have sections dedicated to games, they have sections dedicated to movies, and it's always been pretty well organized. And I think especially amid the pandemic, like I went in 2021, that was my last time going as a member of the press, and that I went into that situation with a fair amount of anxiety, right? That like you're in this big enclosed space during a time when, thankfully COVID numbers were lower, but they were not non-existent. And they did a really good job of being on top of like, having attendees keep masks on, only being unmasked in outdoor spaces, things like that. So, I'm a fan of ReedPop, and I think if anybody can find a way to kind of salvage E3 and kind of bring it back to its former glory, I think ReedPop is probably the organization to do it. I don't know that means they will, but I know they know how to put on an event. So
yeah, I think they probably can. I'm interested to see who does the coverage for E3. because ReedPop own Eurogamer, and I wonder if they get them involved to do some of the coverage and get like access in that way, and kind of have a tie-in with them. I think there's a USA Gamer as well, which is kind of, I don't know, the US cousin of Eurogamer, but doesn't really have the same
A lot
clout.
less popular, huh? I've never heard of it.
But yeah, I could imagine getting them involved to do something. Similar to how Jeff used to work with IGN, and he would have the events on all the time, and he would be there doing like interviews and things. But I think it's a really good way of approaching it. Have it as a trade industry event, which is what it traditionally was, because it was always really successful at that, and it got people in to see demos. It got developers in front of publishers and things like that, and obviously coverage in the press. But open it up in a PAX style event. It's going to be interesting to see how this coincides with Jeff's event, which this year took place on June 9th. So presumably he's going a week before E3. What does Jeff get? What does E3 get? Is there even going to be a draw to E3 if Jeff's got his play days as well that he was trying to put on this year at Summer Game Fest? Does he open those up to the public next year to try and compete with E3?
Or do those suffer because E3 has brand recognition in a way that Summer Game Fest doesn't, right? Like Summer Game Fest, I think, was able to establish itself because of E3's absence. And there's a big question of if, like, because I think about, right, like the gamer we talk about a lot, right, who's the person who doesn't listen to a podcast like ours, doesn't maybe keep up with like the day-to-day news of the industry, but does pay attention to an E3, right, and knows, like, because that's a thing that's happened to me like every year, right, since I started covering games. Is one of my more casual friends is like, what happened at E3? Right? Like, what's the big news from today? What was the big announcement, right? Whatever. They don't think about Summer Game Fest like that. They don't know who Jeff Keighley is, They know E3. And if E3 comes back and it does have a Nintendo Direct or, an Xbox presentation or what have you, like, that does have a cachet that I don't think Summer Game Fest has been around long enough to develop. And also Summer Game Fest has like changed a lot in the 2 years we've had it, right? So it's interesting because I think this does represent a good opportunity for E3 to kind of like rebound a little bit and not have to compromise what it wants to be with what it is best at being as well. Because obviously having the consumer-facing part of the show is going to make the show more profitable, right? And it's going to make it so that you don't necessarily have to rely as much on, exorbitant booth prices and things like that to, like, turn a profit, right? I don't know that that's going to make it cheaper, but, I'm sure that was a move made out of necessity, right? Of the desire to make E3 more successful, right? And to continue to be able to invest in growing it. So I think the idea of, like, rather than trying to shove two very different events together, giving a couple days where, like, the focus is on press, is on, folks actually in the industry and, being able to have those meetings that we've read about in books like Jason's and things like that, where indie devs get to go and talk with publishers and pitch their games and, not limited to indies, but those are the folks that I think are probably have been disproportionately affected by it not existing.
I do wonder how necessary the E3 is for indies, because I remember hearing Cable Sasser from Panic on a podcast, and he was talking about how he was showing off the play date when they were like developing it, and he did it at GDC. He would pull this thing out of his pocket and show it to developers in like hallways and stairwells and things, and just be like, "Hey, look, we're building this thing. Do you want to build a game for it?"
So I think that's a little different, just because, like, not to say that like other industry events can't fill a similar void, but I think the idea of showing off the playdate at GDC makes sense, because the GDC is a game developers conference. You're trying to get developers interested in this thing to develop for it. That feels like a natural thing. Whereas like E3, I feel like is different, right? It is a more it's more focused on like the big business of gaming, right? And like, again, it's anecdotal example, right? Because everybody's experience is going to be different. But if you remember the chapter in Jason's book about Enter the Gungeon, right? Like that was how they got that game made. They sent the person from the Enter the Gungeon team who was the best talker with a briefcase and a copy of the game, and were like, go get as many interviews as you can and see how many people you can show this to. And that's how they found their publisher, right? And like there are a dozen stories like that of games that like, almost died on the vine, and then they were able to get a publishing deal at E3, right? Because they had a really cool demo, right? And I think that other events can maybe fill that gap, but no other event is as big as E3, right? GDC, EGX, none of these other events are as big as E3. And E3 has that attention. And I think that
as big as E3 was, because we don't know who's going to be coming back.
Right.
They've said there's partner showcases starting on June 11th. I wonder if Nintendo's going to be here to close it out. They were a big absentee of Jeff's show. They obviously did their own thing in June instead. So it'll be interesting to see who comes back. Is Microsoft going to do the kind of co-brand thing that they did for last year's E3, where it was sort of like, this is also part of Summer Game Fest and is part of E3 and is also kind of its own thing because we're now big enough that we've got Bethesda that we're just kind of just doing our own thing anyway. And obviously people like EA were doing their own thing anyway prior to all of this. So if you've lost people like Square, like they're not because they were at Jeff's, if you've lost like Bandai Namco because they were at Jeff's, who's going to be there?
Yeah. And it's like, what is that? I don't know. What does that look like? Do you have people that try to play both sides and like do a presentation at both? Do you have, maybe you like Square or someone like that does a presentation at Summer Game Fest, but then they have a game that's on the stage, or you know what I mean, right? Like maybe that's a bad example with Square, but like you have a game featured in PlayStation's thing at the Summer Game Fest, and then you also were in the Xbox showcase at E3, or you also do a presentation at E3, right? And you can do the whole like.
Well, we saw that a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? Where they unveiled Yakuza, the new Like a Dragon game in the PlayStation showcase, and then it was at TGS, and you got more of a deeper dive into it at the TGS presentation. So they could do something like that.
Yeah, there's the question of do things like that work out, and then it's also like, I don't know, right? Like, do you think there will be a bigger turnout at E3, or like that because there's 2 days of consumer focus, like you want demos for your upcoming game to build hype around it, like. I don't know. Like, I think there's a lot of questions there, and it's going to be interesting to see like what everybody does and how everybody like who gets in line with who, and is it like these two competing things? Is Jeff going to move Summer Game Fest and maybe try to get out of the way and do something else? Like, I don't know. Like,
no, there's no way. There's no way. That man is he's not going to bow down.
No, I think you're probably right, but it's like, I don't know. I guess we'll see, right? Because it's like, can Jeff undercut them? Like, are those things that he can do that like make his show more attractive? I don't know, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see it play out, because I think, we've thought E3 was dead 2 or 3 times over, and it's not dead yet, right? Like, it's still kicking. And with
that brand, it's that brand power, you see those red and yellow E3, like, you know exactly what it is. People have been going to it for decades at this point, and I don't think anything else can come close to that. People who aren't in the know, that know who Jeff Keighley is, they know what E3 is. They might not know who Jeff is. They might not know what Summer Game Fest is, but they know what E3 is. They've been watching it for years, and I think people still want to go to it. It was one of those things that everyone always wanted to go to. It was a trade-only show. It had this kind of allure around it. And now
I still feel that way.
You can go.
Yeah. Well, I want to go as a member of the press, but.
Oh well, yeah. We'll apply for a press badge.
We'll see what happens. That'd be awesome. I would love to go. You got to come though.
Yeah, if I can afford a flight, yeah, I will.
Yeah. So I feel like it is not a foregone conclusion how this plays out, because I think that you're right that there are a lot of people who probably feel burned by the ESA. There are a lot of people that know Jeff and like working with Jeff, and I think that that will lead to some loyalty there. But I also think there's a lot of people who recognize the other half of what you just said, which is that the Summer Game Fest is not E3, and it doesn't have the same level of cultural cachet. And I wonder how many people that really matters to. And they want to get their stuff in front of the widest audience possible. Not, well, we'll bet on Jeff for a couple of years and hope E3 goes away. I don't know. It's easy to get behind him when he's the only game in town. But now that you have to pick and choose.
Yeah, I know. But so even then, some people didn't get behind him. Some companies like Nintendo were, it was like a visible Nintendo-shaped hole at Jeff's event.
And I mean, the idea that like Sony, who's bailed on E3 the last several years, were like, oh, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, theirs was weird though. They made sure they had their own presentation beforehand. You know, do they just do their own presentation next year and it's like available at both? It's like in that period in the middle, like the limbo state between Jeff's show and E3, if they are both doing it in June. And how annoying is this going to be for the press? You having to go out for two events in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think a lot of outlets are going to struggle to cover both.
Yeah, I guess you gotta pick then who's got the most, you know?
Yeah.
You go for that one.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Or you send different teams to both of them, I guess, but
yeah, you could send different teams, or you think about what is going to be mostly online. Because if E3 is this big in-person presence, Summer Game Fest the last 2 years has really been a mainly digital event, and it was only this year they had like a couple of days where you could go and play some games, and people got hands on with like Sonic and stuff. But I can't imagine if that came anywhere near the level of like interaction you would have at E3. Where there's booths and stands and, you know, everyone goes all out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're probably right. I guess we'll see. So let's jump into our talking point this week. Cyberpunk 2077 is experiencing a bit of a renaissance right now. The Netflix anime spin-off Edgerunners dropped just very recently as of this recording. And since then, the game has been experiencing a really, really nice resurgence over on Steam. It's been the best-selling game on Steam a few times now in the last month, and has brought in over 1 million players a day, concurrent users. So that's huge. That's like the biggest, blip the game has had on the radar since release. And obviously, I think that somewhat has to do with the fact that the game was on sale, 50% off, which I'm sure helped. But I don't think you can not draw a line between renewed interest in this IP and the show, right? Which is cool. So that has led to a lot of discussion about Cyberpunk, right? And a lot of people talking about how there have been all these updates to the game since launch, and obviously now that the next-gen, quote-unquote next-gen consoles are more ubiquitous, right? If you do want to play it on console, playing on PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X is obviously a night and day difference between what the game looked like at launch and what it looked like on previous platforms, right?
Yeah, I mean, we even played it on Series X, right? I think you also played it on Series X?
I did.
It was still a car crash, regardless of it being on next gen at launch.
It's definitely a lot different, though, right? Like it was way worse on PlayStation 4.
Oh yeah, it was unacceptable. It should have never have launched on those platforms.
No, and we talked about that to death at the time, so we don't need to rehash that. But I think it's we all know what the problems were with that game at launch, right? It was under they overpromised and underdelivered. It was underbaked.
Yeah, I do think it's good context though, because the PC version, obviously dependent on your PC, didn't have those issues, or at least some of the issues that were present on the last gen consoles, because a lot of those were caused by underpowered CPUs and GPUs,
right.
and mechanical hard drives was a really big problem in trying to stream in assets that it just couldn't load fast enough to get onto the screen. So I think the PC version was always a step up
Of
above
course.
where the console versions
For sure.
were. And so for it to shoot back up the charts on PC, yes, it's obviously uh, unexpected, I guess. It's not something that happens regularly 2 years after a game launches for it to become the number 4 most played game on Steam again.
Especially not
But
for a single player game.
Yeah, multiplayer happens pretty frequently, I would guess. Or the only other time it really happens is when a game is suddenly found. Like Among Us, I think, was out for like 2 years and then all of a sudden got popular.
Yeah, like that's the thing though. That's
and shot up the
multiplayer,
charts.
right? And I feel like coming back to a
Yeah.
multiplayer game and having that pop off, that's way more likely, I think. Okay, I was gonna let you finish your thought, but
Remember, my thought was finished.
Okay. So, that there has been a significant amount of updates since the game launched, right? I know there was a pretty significant patch around the time of launch that I even got to experience the benefits of as when I was playing through the game the first time. But there's been a bunch of things that have come since then, like an overhauled skill tree. They updated how cops worked because there was that whole it was like the GTA wanted system on speed, and like cars and a lot of other things that were glitchy or buggy or messy have been cleaned up. They've added more romance options, which I actually didn't know. They also added transmog so that if you can take powers from a specific clothing set and apply it to a piece of clothing that you like, so you don't have to look like a insane person who's wearing 4 different outfits if you want good stats. So lots of small changes right here and there, but by and large, it looks like what has been the deciding factor has been that piece of extended media, right? Because Edgerunners, really, really popular as of right now. It's got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 96 audience score. It's got an 8.6 out of 10 on IMDb. So it's very successful. And I've heard exclusively positive things about it.
You know what's really sad, Pete, is this won't even count towards your video game adaptation.
It absolutely counts towards
a board game.
No,
it doesn't.
No.
Cyberpunk's a board game that got adapted into a video game.
No, that's not how it works. No, that's not how it
that's
works.
where the IP comes from.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, that is how it works.
That's not how it works. You and I both know that this fucking anime would not exist if it wasn't for the video game. Don't even step to me like that.
I don't agree. It's not called Cyberpunk 2077 Edgerunners.
Doesn't matter. There, bam.
It's okay. You're not getting 3 other ones by the end of the year. Anyway.
How many did I say it would be? I thought I only said it would be 3.
I thought it was 5.
No, I think it's 2 or 3. And if the Dragon Age one is good in December, I fucking win. So, I went from thinking that was definitely sunk points to being like, I think I might actually have this one. All right, this might work out for me over here. And I think unsurprisingly, all of this positive news has been very warmly received by folks in the Cyberpunk fandom. I saw there was a Twitch stream with one of the developers who was going on about how great it felt to finally feel like the game was good and representative of all the work that they'd done, and that this narrative around it was changing. And obviously that's really nice to see, for the folks who worked on the game, because I'm sure that we all know, right, the problems with the game weren't because of the development team. It was more on CD Projekt Red's, marketing and pushing the game forward.
It was the management pushing it out to focus on profits because they wanted to get some cash.
Well, and also overhyping it for multiple years, right? When it wasn't done, being like, "This is going to be the best, most revolutionary game ever," and then putting it out before it was finished.
They showed that that vertical slice, which was polished as hell, and it looked really impressive in that 40 minutes to 1 hour demo. And granted, that section was really polished, but the rest of the game was a mess.
Right. And, that's great to see. But then there is this whole other emergence of people from the community who are like, the game was always great. It was always perfect. It never had any problems. Like you just get it now.
On PC, some of that might be the case, right? If they played this game on PC, they would have never experienced any of those issues that people on PS4 and Xbox One had. But like, you can't forget, Sony took this game off the store. Refunds were issued to everyone if they wanted one. Like, I think it was being sold for like $1 at one point in GameStop. Like this game wasn't. The consensus wasn't this game was good. It was not a good game for a very long time, and it took them until February of this year to get the next gen patch out.
And it's 2
which
years
is
later.
Almost 2 years. 2 years after its release. Like, I think really the consensus should be that this needed 2 more years in the oven, and if they'd have released it alongside a really hit anime show on Netflix and like launched the two in tandem at the same time, it would have been a 1-2 punch, and they'd have had a knockout hit, and everyone would have been talking about it, and it probably would have been up for Game of the Year.
I think so. You mentioned the thing about the PC players. That was the thing I found most frustrating around the discourse around this game, was like talking to people who played it on PC and like them refusing to acknowledge that it had any kind of problem. And like, I literally I got in an argument with somebody on a podcast about this once. I was a guest on a friend's podcast, and I was arguing with one of the hosts because I was just like, if this game was made by Ubisoft, you would be raking it over the coals. But because you're a PC fanboy who likes CD Projekt Red, you're going to just write this game a blank check to be awful in multiple areas, to be terrible, and to be like, no, it's still perfect. Still a great game. It's just like, that drove me in.
You were never invited back on that podcast again?
No, I was. And I yelled at him again. But it's just, it's like, I get it. I get that CD Projekt Red has been this developer that we gave their flowers for Witcher 3, and they gave free DLC, and they gave you the thank you note, and they're the good guys. This is how you do it. This is the right way. They stepped on a rake with this game, and we need to, you gotta own that for what it is, right? It's fine. The question I want to ask you,
and the I'm sorry DLC on this was like dreadful. It was just 2 tiny little morsels of
it's
skins,
a car skin.
Aesthetics.
It's like, what? That's it.
It's like this is like, that's unacceptable in my mind to call that DLC. That's like a pre-order bonus that you get.
They've
like,
also
oh,
they also had plans to do multiple DLCs, and they've scaled that back to just one. So,
which honestly, I think that's probably wise. Scale it back, make that a really solid DLC. And I know Johnny's coming back, which I found him insufferable throughout the main game. But people like him. People like Keanu. It's nice that he's come back to reprise his role.
I told myself I wasn't going to do this because this is not what I want. I don't want to come on here and talk about why I don't like Cyberpunk, even though I finished it. I finished the game. You can't tell me I'm wrong. I beat it. I liked it enough to beat it. So I'm allowed to have this opinion, okay? Eagle-eyed listeners, okay? Eagle-eared listeners. Everyone likes Keanu Reeves. Everyone, right? Keanu Reeves is a extremely likable dude. The fact that they found a way to have him play a character that I found so repugnant that it was just like, anytime I was just like, dude, just stop. And I've seen so many people blame Keanu Reeves. It's not Keanu Reeves. It's the writing. It's the dialogue. It's the character. Okay? He's insufferable, and I can't stand him. And he never...
Yeah, I mean, I love Keanu. He was the star of a movie which was just all about him defending the fact that someone killed his dog, So...
John Wick rules, right? Matrix, awesome. Like, we all like Keanu. This is not an anti-Keanu point. It's Johnny Silverhand sucks. He sucks as a guy. It makes no sense that he has any friends. It makes no sense that these people from his past forgive him for no fucking reason. He's terrible. He's absolutely terrible. And I would be so much more interested in this DLC if he was not a part of it. But that's fine. The thing I wanted to ask you is, all of this, does it mean anything? Right? Like, is this a true comeback for Cyberpunk in terms of its narrative, or is this an artificial blip that's being accentuated by what seems to be a very good television show. Because that's kind of my read on things, right? Is like, I don't know that this game has earned its redemption arc in the way that, like, we joked about it with your prediction, right, with No Man's Sky and everything. But I also think of, like, Final Fantasy XIV, right, which famously launched kind of messy and then now is beloved game. And both of those games went through big, serious period where the team, like, kind of tore it down and built it back up.
I mean, Final Fantasy 14, they like took the game down. They
right.
like they refunded everyone and started from scratch.
And fundamentally, like, rebuilt it, and reimagined it and got it right. I gotta say, I haven't played since I finished my first run through, which was maybe a month or so after launch. I don't see anything on this list to me that feels like enough to warrant that level of the narrative being completed, right? Of them really kind of like, history will remember this as a great game now rather than a game that was a train wreck.
And I think people think it was a great game anyway. It gets an 86 on Metacritic. I think it's up there. People did hold it to that level. It was the technical issues on consoles that was really holding it back, because the console version of the game gets a way, way, way lower level. But on PC, it's up there with an 86. And if the console versions are fixed now, or more people have access to the current gen hardware, Series X or PS5, then maybe the Netflix show kind of jogged their memory as to why they wanted to play that game in the first place. Of, oh yeah, I remember the Cyberpunk world. It's really interesting. It's really cool. It's got all these cool characters. It's got this cool narrative behind it. And like, it could be a blip, but if 1 million people a day are playing the game, it depends how long that continues, obviously. It could be a winning strategy. And it could be the start of that redemption arc, especially if they can ride this out into that new DLC, into the kind of that year, I guess year 3 that they're looking into now.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big part of it.
That,
like, if the DLC is received well, that will make a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and No Man's Sky took a very long time for anyone to kind of go back to the game, I think. They had that No Man's Sky Next update. And it's interesting that the next gen update came in February, and like, it was a kind of a blip. No one really cared about it. It was like, oh, okay, there's this update, but I'm kind of done with that game. I tried it once and it left a nasty taste in my mouth, so I'm not going to go back and give it another try. Maybe that was unfair, because I think if a lot of the issues were just technical, maybe people should be going back and trying this game. And just even the kind of conversation around it in the last week or so has made me want to dip back into it. There's a bunch of people in the Discord playing it. I didn't realize it had that cross progression if you link to your Xbox and your Steam account, so I might try it on Steam Deck and see how that works, or stream it from Xbox onto my Steam Deck, or just play it on Xbox and see where I got to. But I also kind of feel like I'd want to go in fresh, because I don't know where I was.
Yeah,
I'd want to pick a different starting
You got
story.
barely even into it anyway, right? Like, you only played
it was like 20 hours in.
You played that much, really?
Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
It takes 8 hours to get to
the title screen,
the main story.
Yeah.
So,
worth pointing out, the 86 that you talked about, that is on PC. It's got an 87 on Xbox. It's got a 75 on PS5. Every user score is 7. It's got a 7 on the Steam rating, and on Google's rating, it's got like 3 stars out of 5. And it's very interesting because even like the user reviews on Metacritic, they're highly skewed by people that are fanboys. And I take that with a grain of salt. You don't have to believe what I'm saying, because obviously I'm coming down on the fact that I don't really think much of Cyberpunk. So, like, you might write off.
I think the user reviews are probably opposite of that, because looking at the Xbox version, I'm looking at the Xbox One version. 931 negative reviews versus 722 positive.
For the
Like the majority
last
of people went on this and were just like, "This is trash."
Sure, but like looking at the PC side of things, right? Too many glitches, but I still want to give this game a 10 out of 10. Play it after a few months. Like, that's not a 10 out of 10 then, right? Like, you gave this game a 10 for no reason. The best game ever. Game of the year 2020. Masterpiece storyline and gameplay. Really? Sorry, that's really hard for me to understand who that person is, I gotta say. You know? But I recognize, like, taste is subjective, right? There are people that like things that are, like, edgy in that way, and the way in which I found it to be kind of cringy and sophomoric, right? Like, that speaks to certain people, so fine, fair enough, right? Like, if you really connected with the story, I respect that, but mechanically, saying this game's perfect, that's tough for me. That's tough for me to
Yeah,
swallow.
I mean, but outlets were giving it high scores at launch. Like Cyberpunk 2077 PC review at IGN is a 9 out of 10. Right.
Yeah,
I think Game Informer gave it pretty high as well.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
I don't see that, right? Like, I think the most generous scoring I think I could give this game, even if it had zero technical issues, would be like a low B. The world is shallow, right? Like, it's a mile wide and an inch deep, and
that's how I felt about it. Yeah, like the whole implants thing didn't go deep enough. I thought it was going to be cooler than it was.
There's very, very little opportunity for role playing, right? And like actually making meaningful decisions. You have like 2 outcomes that you can realistically achieve, you know, and it's like, that's not the game they sold. That's not the game they marketed, right? Like, this is supposed to be like a, you know, Fallout-esque kind of like, you are, you know, what implants you get impacts what missions you can pick up and this and that. And, you know, and it's just like, none of that shit really amounted to anything. And a lot of the supporting characters are really cool, but both the main character and Johnny, not great. You know, I don't know. I think it's got such a distinct like early 2000s like edgelord vibe that me at 16 maybe would have vibed with this, but like
when you were watching Family Guy every night.
Even at 16 that was in the rear view for me. But, you know, I was reading fucking Spawn comics and stuff, right? Like, I'm fine. I dabble with some edgelord shit here and there, but I really struggled to emotionally invest in this game in the way I wanted to. Because even when there were, like, things that I liked, like the Jenny storyline, right? Or, like, the stuff with Pan Am, like, those things were really good and cool.
One as well, where you have to like carry the crucifix and stuff, which was really cool storyline.
And it's like, you know, like there's a lot of things about it that are good, right? Like, obviously, I wouldn't have finished the game if I thought it was totally devoid of merit. But like, oof, I can't imagine thinking this game is like a 9 out of 10. I really can't, even now. But that's the whole point.
No,
this,
like
right?
I think of other games I consider like a 9 out of 10, like The Last of Us Part 2. And I'm just like, no, I wouldn't include it anywhere near that level. I think this would have probably been a 7 for me, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe a 6.
And it's also like, you know, it happens all the time. There are plenty of games that I think deserve higher scores that, you know, don't connect with people in the way that they connect with me. So it's like, taste is totally subjective, right? So it's like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like, you're wrong for liking this and I'm right because I think it sucks. But like,
but do you want to check out the like Netflix show? Because I'm really curious as to what that's like, because I love the idea of a world, like the Cyberpunk world, but a story that's actually compelling that doesn't include Johnny, and just this beautiful animation.
Yeah, I am interested in it. The fact that it's gotten such good reception is definitely something that I'm very, very open to, and I'm definitely like willing to give a shot. And I liked the world of Cyberpunk enough that I think I would be interested in more stories there. The things that I didn't like about it were more or less localized to the main story. You know, like the side stuff was the stuff I was most interested in. But like, I really struggled with their characterization of Johnny. And like, I think he has a lot of the kind of like negative heat that I think people attribute to characters like Rick from Rick and Morty, or like BoJack Horseman, or like those are the two that come to mind. I don't need to fish for a third example.
I quite like BoJack.
The show or the character?
Yeah, the show.
No, I also like the
now,
show.
So.
But that's the thing, right? Is I like both of those shows. But if you identify with either of those characters or empathize with them like in a serious way, you're missing the point, right? Like you're not getting the fact that like BoJack is a bad dude, right? And like you can feel sorry for him, but like if you're like, oh, like I relate to this so much, like go to therapy, you know? And like I look at Johnny as a character, and he has all those trappings of like he's a piece of shit. He's a rude asshole. He's a self-centered douchebag. He's, you know, a sexist. He's, you know, like just doesn't give a fuck about anybody but himself. And this is a character who we have this antagonistic relationship with, but then like they ask you to empathize with him and to solve his fucking problems and to reconcile with his ex-girlfriend and his old bandmate and this and that. And it's like, no.
It's the reason like characters get rewrites, you know? Like I'm thinking of like the first series of The Office or the first series of Parks and Rec, where those characters, they just didn't work.
Michael Scott is actually, that's the third character I was trying to think of, right? Where it's like,
yeah,
don't you feel bad for him?
The original?
Don't you feel bad for him?
The original Michael Scott, you can feel bad for him, and he's not even good at his job. Right. And it's just like...
No, he just sucks.
Whereas when they rewrite him, he's, you know, he's kind of harmless. He just makes these like stupid dad jokes all the time. Like,
but that's the thing, right? It's like, is he harmless though, right? And we're not here to talk about that. But that's the problem, right? Is like you are like supposed to be the character who's like, oh, doesn't he suck? Isn't he a jerk? But then they also are like, but we don't actually want you to think he's a jerk. So yeah, he just said this super misogynistic thing or this racist thing or this or that. But deep down, he's a good guy. And I don't want that. I don't need, that is a trope we can leave behind. And like with Johnny, they don't even try to give him his comeuppance, or that like they just rationalize like, he's a dick, but whatever. I guess we love him. It's just like, okay.
Yeah, everybody's favorite terrorist, just in your head.
Yeah. And it's like, and don't get me wrong, dude, like ideologically, I should vibe with him at least a little bit, right? He hates corporations and all, like he's in a punk band and all this, but it's like, he's a douchebag. He's a fucking douchebag. And it's like, I don't want to identify with him. I don't want to feel sorry for him, you know? Like, and it's like, I know, I guess I could have been rude to him the whole time and then my character would have died. So that would have been my other option. Great.
Maybe I will be rude to him all the time when I play. I think I was pretty rude to him most of the time.
That sounds like you. That's what you do in games, right? You're always like a jerk.
I think it's so fun. I like to be an asshole. It's really fun.
Yeah,
I think it's because I don't do it in real life. Like I feel terrible if I upset someone. It's like if I know I've made someone cry, it's my least. Like if I've made someone cry, I feel awful forever. And so if I could do it in video games, then so what? Because you know they don't have feelings. They're just pixels on a screen.
Oh man, I have like the exact opposite. Like I'm just like, oh, I made this character cry. Better reload like 2 hours of gameplay so I can make a different choice.
You know, it's just reminded me of a game Ray from the community made years ago, and it doesn't work anymore. And I need to get him to get it up and running so that we can show it to everyone. But the concept was that you play this game and you kind of think you're talking to a computer, to like AI, and you can be an asshole to it, as far as I'm aware. Like you just type into the box, but there's actually a real person on the other end, and the other person has no idea as well. And there's like a real person on the other end.
That's awesome. Also, Steve, before we put a pin in this, because I want to be clear, I am getting a point for that. I'm getting a percentage of a point for this, at least, because it says right here, Steve, on Wikipedia, Cyberpunk Edgerunners is a 2022 Polish-Japanese cyberpunk web anime series based on the video game Cyberpunk 2077.
If it's based on the video game and not based on the board game IP that the video game was based on, then fine.
The series was animated by Studio Trigger under the supervision of CD Projekt Red. Bam! Bam!
Yeah, then that definitely is. However,
point
I
for
feel
your
like
boy.
I should at least get some kind of point, and we'll talk about this when we get to it, but I feel like I should get some kind of point for this resurgence that they've had.
I don't agree.
Yes.
No, you just agreed with me that it wasn't enough, and it wasn't as much as No Man's Sky or Final Fantasy XIV. And you said in
it doesn't have
your
to
prediction
be as much as that.
It does, Steve, because your specific prediction was that it will have a revival akin to No Man's Sky. And it has not.
Yeah, and I think to some extent this is the start, at least the start of it.
The start of it, maybe.
The start of when people were getting back into No Man's Sky.
That's not what you said, though.
All it takes.
You didn't say that it would
start. All it takes in the coming weeks is for us to see articles of like Cyberpunk 2077 is good now. This is a great game. Everyone needs to try this.
I'm so
the
glad.
next gen patch is awesome.
I'm so glad that you said that because I searched right before this, right? And one of the top articles I found was how Cyberpunk 2077 has not earned its redemption arc. So there's at least a debate about it.
Yeah, there is definitely a debate about it. We've managed to talk about it now for like half an hour, but I don't agree that it's not had any kind of redemption. And
you didn't say that though. You didn't say any kind of redemption. You said it would be a No Man's Sky level.
That's because you wouldn't let me say that.
That's because you made me agree to like fucking multiple TV shows had to be good for my prediction. So if you don't want to get nickel and dime, brother, don't nickel and dime me.
Have one.
Why?
Like, oh yeah, that one TV show is going to be good this year.
Bro, this is only the first. It is September, and only one TV show has been good so far. That would have been a totally reasonable prediction. You made me make it ridiculous, so I had to push you.
That. Why is that the case? Like, seriously.
That it's the only
Why can Hollywood not make a good TV show? Because animated, I always feel like animations do a lot better.
Yeah.
Like, the Castlevania anime was good
fucking
as well.
slaps. It's so good.
Why can't they make a good live-action show?
I don't know. Takes a lot of investment, you know?
Yeah. You need 2 certified fresh by Rotten Tomatoes.
2.
So, 2 certified fresh. So it has to have that certified fresh logo.
I know. We debated this because I was like, well, Sonic was good, right? Yeah. Not certified fresh, though. It was received well by audiences.
Yeah, it was like 80. It was it was not up there at all.
Close. But this has 100%. So what the fuck's up? I'm rocking and rolling right now. All we need is one more good one. Dragon Age comes out. If that's good, I'm in. I'm fucking in like Flynn, you know?
Yeah.
You got a chance. So. You got a chance. If it retains this vibe and people are still playing, talking about it in droves, then I'll concede. But if this is a momentary blip and it's all about to go away again and we don't talk about it until the DLC comes, I don't think we've reached it. I don't think you've hit the threshold.
No, maybe it's next year. Maybe I'm too early. You know, maybe it is.
You've had a couple like that.
Some of my other predictions as well.
Yeah, you've had a couple like that where it's like, oh damn, so close.
Yeah. Yeah, like I felt I was close with like the Xbox controller with adaptive triggers because I really thought they were going to chuck it on the Elite Series 2, but they fucking didn't do it.
You can't. Can you hear that?
No.
Okay.
What is it?
They're drilling outside my house again with no warning, so good thing we're almost near the end of this one. I don't know if this is coming up on the microphone. I feel like it probably is because my fucking desk is shaking, but
oh my god.
We'll finish up the episode in a second here. Yeah, I don't know. I think to put a pin on this, I don't think that Cyberpunk has had its redemption song yet, but I think the DLC represents a major opportunity. I think between the goodwill that they've been able to generate with this anime created by Studio Trigger, who is one of the most celebrated anime studios in the world, that that I think is probably a really good bump for them, and the fact that now you've brought in all these new people who are playing the game seemingly for the first time, right? Or replaying it on PC, and obviously having a better experience than they would have on a console at launch. I think all those things are things that are pushing us in the right direction. If the DLC comes out and it's a bop and it's really strong, then I think that could maybe be the moment, right? And we'll see what happens from there. But
yeah, I could see DLC and then a boxed copy for PS5 and
definitive
Series
edition
X
kind of thing.
releasing with the definitive edition, the complete collection. Sell that for 60 or 70, whatever they want to charge.
They almost got me on that sale, bud. I almost bought it. And I was like, I'm not buying this game for $30. I'm not paying $30 for this game again.
Do you know what? Just stream it from your Xbox. Do your Steam Deck.
I could do that.
Done.
I could do that. By all accounts, it does run very well on Steam Deck. That's what we've heard in the community. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and that cross progression thing is really cool. The fact that you can play it on your console, which is what we were talking about, that we really want to come to Sony games. Like, let me play Spider-Man on the TV for all the like cinematic stuff.
Every video game, just let me have a cross save function. Come on, please.
I found out you can do it on Ubisoft games if you use their shitty Ubisoft Connect launcher. Because I can now play, like, I can carry my save over from Far Cry 6 to Xbox if I want to.
Very nice. That's cool. So yeah, I'm interested to see what the narrative on this game ends up being removed from it, because I certainly it's been an interesting winding road, and I doubt this will be the last time we talk about it. So when the DLC comes around, because I'm such a hater, even though I like the game enough, right? I think it's pretty good. I think it's at least a C.
Was it B minus or B plus?
I said that's the most generous interpretation I could imagine giving it. Right? Where if somebody told me, oh no, it's not that bad, it's a B, I'd be like, okay, I could see why you would argue it's a B. But for somebody to tell me, look me in the face and tell me they think this game's an A, a 9, that's hard for me to swallow. I'd put it more on the 6.5 to 7, maybe 7.5 on a good day range, but that's just me. I will play the DLC. I will play the DLC because I need to be able to fairly pass judgment on it. So
it's paid for, right? So you're gonna buy it and play it.
If I want to be able to keep putting my money where my mouth is, I'm
nothing if not talking Johnny Silverhand.
Exactly. I'm not a Johnny Silverhand, Steve. I'm nothing if not a man of integrity and honor. Okay, and CD Projekt Red can't take that away from me. They can't. No matter how many times they make me play Cyberpunk, So,
yeah.
If you want to let us know what your thoughts are on Cyberpunk 2077's resurgence, or have you played the game? Have you not? Where are you at with it? Are you watching the anime? I know some of you are, especially I know one Matthew Murphy has been enjoying it quite a bit. So I'd love to hear some opinions from folks who got the game late, who haven't played it since launch. Like, where are you at with it? Where do you think it is in its redemption arc? Or will it ever complete said redemption arc? Because that, I think, is a very interesting question. But one we will not have time to answer here today. So please, if you want to write in with your thoughts, all that stuff, if you want to find more of our content, if you want to get in touch with us, if you want to show your support over on patreon.com, head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find links to all the places we are all over the web. However you choose to get involved, however you choose to show your support, we appreciate you tuning in for this week's show, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Flip Screen Games Podcast. I've been Pete. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week.